The moment the betrayal landed, the air turned heavy. A business deal, once brimming with promise, lay in ruins. $10,000 ripped from my grasp. Not just currency, but reputation, trust, dignity. A calculated betrayal dressed as partnership. It wasn't the loss that pierced me. It was the betrayal that shackled my pride. Disbelief morphed into a chilling stillness. They believed I would drown in despair. They were wrong. In the silence of the fallout, I studied their treachery as one might dissect a body on the slab. Emails, contracts, phone calls. I cut into the flesh of their deceit, not obsessively, but with precision. Each line revealed patterns of manipulation, a web spun with the intent to trap. This was no accident. They had orchestrated it all. The pain transformed into clarity. You don't get mad. You get methodical. I began to plan, not in the heat of emotion, but from the cooler shadows of strategy. I rented an unassuming office across the street from their fortress, a place they wouldn't notice. The walls were thin, but my resolve was thick. Power sits in the quiet corner of the room, saying nothing. They thought they had won. I let them believe it. I ghosted the industry, vanished from the networks they frequented. I was not defeated. I was invisible. My withdrawal, part of the strategy, lowered their guard. Let them forget you. They won't notice you walking behind them. Then came the moment of investment. I transformed that 10 grand into something far more dangerous, a competing brand built from the ground up. I hired their discarded talent, but not from pity. No, I positioned them meticulously to build in their blind spot. Nothing is louder than a man who speaks with results. Time moved slowly by design. As they basked in their borrowed victory, I sharpened my skills. I observed their arrogance, their complacency. Sleep well with borrowed victories. I'll bill you for interest. I prepared for the moment I would unleash my creation upon them. So I bided my time, nurturing a quiet storm. They thought I was done. The quiet was my greatest strength, the calm before the eruption. In the quiet aftermath, I immersed myself in the betrayal, dissecting every interaction as if peeling an onion layer by layer. Emails became my surgical instruments. Contracts turned into the autopsy reports of a deal gone dark. Each line, each misplaced comma spoke of intent, an elaborate scheme wrapped in trust. This was no accident. I'd been played, and they had thought I would do nothing. They were painfully mistaken. This analysis wasn't born of obsession, but strategy, a cold, calculated response to the wounds they had inflicted. Day by day, the fog of disbelief receded, revealing the sharp edges of reality. I studied this lesson. Manipulation is an art form, one they clearly mastered at my expense. I gripped that pain tightly, transforming it into precision. You don't get mad. You get methodical. As I worked through my findings, my inner focus sharpened. Emotion became a dull instrument. I had no use for it in this game. Instead, I plotted. Each moment was an exercise in discipline, restraint, and strategic foresight. I rented a plain office, bare of personality, across the street from their shiny headquarters. My new sanctuary became a listening post, a vantage point to observe their every move. They wouldn't know I was there. Let them think they had won. I withdrew from their circles, made my absence noticeable only to me. In my unremarkable silence, I dismissed their triumph. The optics of my surrender played into my hand. They lowered their guard, moving through their routines with the arrogance of those who believe they have cut their competition down to size. Let them forget you. They won't notice you walking behind them. In the shadows, I transformed that $10,000 into a weapon. It was not a weapon of destruction, but of creation, an investment into my carefully crafted rival brand. I sought out the talent they had discarded, not out of pity, but positioning. They wouldn't see my team coming. They were too busy celebrating a victory built on the ruins of trust. Time crept by with steady, deliberate intention. With every passing day, I watched their movements closely. Their arrogance, an affliction I noted with quiet glee, would eventually lead to their downfall. Sleep well with borrowed victories. I'll bill you for interest. They believed they were safe, that their wreckage of my life had secured their futures. They were wrong. I transformed the remnants of my loss into strategic foundations, each move a whisper in the cacophony of their self-congratulatory laughter. That tiny office, less than half the size of theirs, became my sanctuary beneath the radar. It was nondescript and utilitarian. Gray walls, a single desk, a laptop with little more than a flickering cursor illuminating the darkness. This silence was heavy with purpose, not defeat. From my perch, I watched them thrive in their hubris. Their glass facades sparkled under the sun, but I knew the cracks ran deep. I studied their comings and goings, my eyes memorizing their rhythms, their vulnerabilities. Power sits in the quiet corner of the room, saying nothing. I recorded their conversations through the thin walls, piecing together their buzz of ideas like a predator tracing the scent of prey. They didn't know I was there, those fools comfortable in their delusions. I drifted through the industry like a ghost, maybe a phantom of their past. No longer a target, but an unseen threat sowing the seeds of their unknowing demise. They assumed surrender had come easy for me. Little did they know I was laying the groundwork for something far more sinister. Recruiting the talent they cast off felt like fishing in a barrel. I approached them like a confidant, offering the promise of diversion from their past disappointments. "You've been sidelined," I told them. "Join me in the shadows." And one by one, they took the bait, pulled into the depths of my meticulously constructed plan. I was building a team that would be the very essence of their undoing. That $10,000 was an investment in my stealthy revival, a foundation upon which I would erect a monument to their downfall. Each wage I paid, each coffee shared, was another thread in the tapestry of deception. I was not sowing chaos. I was crafting an alternative reality that would stand in stark contrast to theirs. They wouldn't see us coming. Instead, they'd watch their kingdom dismantle piece by piece, unaware that I was the architect behind it all. Time moved precisely, but to them, it felt stagnant. Their accomplishments fed an arrogance that blinded them. I rarely joined in conversations, any lingering remnants of my old self cloaked beneath layers of cool detachment. Let them forget you. They won't notice you walking behind them. Every day was an exercise in patience, a rehearsal for the inevitable reckoning. As whispers of my venture began to ripple through the industry, I could almost hear the shifting tides. The rising numbers of our new clients trickled in like a soft rain, imperceptible at first, but building to a storm that would drown them in despair. I stood firm in my silence, breathing in the anticipation like a fine wine, complex, layered, but ultimately intoxicating. Sleep well with borrowed victories, I'd thought, as I imagined them toasting their imagined supremacy. I savored that feeling, like a finely honed blade awaiting its moment. Each interaction with my new team delivered incremental victories, sowing anxiety in their unsuspecting hearts. I moved in and out of their vision like air, present, yet utterly ungraspable. If they felt the chill of my presence, they attributed it to their own insecurities. They considered themselves untouchable, but I was far from done. This blueprint was still in the works, but the foundations were laid solidly, ready to hold the weight of their coming collapse. My plan would not be loud. It would emerge quietly, like shadows blending seamlessly into the night. Soon, they would feel the cold breath of the inevitable looming just behind them, yet remain blissfully unaware of the force that silently tiptoed closer every passing day. I withdrew, carving out a void around me. No calls, no emails, just silence. They believed my absence to be the echo of defeat, but silence is a veil under which ambition thrives. In their eyes, I had vanished, a specter lost in a world they had conquered. Little did they know, I was tucked neatly in their shadows, a ghost biding its time. The office across the street became my sanctuary, a place where whispers turned to plans. I immersed myself in their world without engaging, a watcher in the night. Behind the thin walls, I listened as they celebrated their fabricated victories, their laughter a masquerade cloaking the fissures in their armor. They enjoyed the savor of triumph, blissfully unaware of the foundation shifting beneath them. Each passing day cultivated patience, and my resolve deepened. My detachment was deliberate. I embraced the guise of invisibility. Out there in the open air, they moved with an arrogance that blinded them to the realities unfolding. Let them forget me. Let them think I was conquered. They wouldn't notice me lurking just beyond their field of vision, growing stronger with every quiet second. In the silence, I positioned myself like a chess player, watching their pieces shift across the board. They were careless, thinking their moves were invulnerable. I spent time collecting intel, piecing together their strategies, their trading patterns. Subtle transactions slipped through my fingers like water, save for the few I chose to catch, only the important ones. Those discarded talents I plucked from their ranks became the heart of my creation. Conversations were easy, laced with promises of respect and opportunity. They longed for validation, and I was there, offering it with a smile. "You've been sidelined," I'd say, coaxing them toward my vision of rebirth, my quiet incantation luring them into my fold. They stepped into my light, unaware they were stepping away from theirs. In time, my team grew. Their whispers created momentum. Each new ally a silent arrow aimed at the heart of my enemy. As I cultivated this growing force, I could almost taste the fear that would soon envelop them like a fog. I invested every bit of that $10,000, transforming it not into acts of revenge but into the genesis of a rival brand, a fortress to be built in their blind spot. Weeks ticked by, and still, they danced in their confidence. They had grown accustomed to victory without realizing the killer shadows lingering on their periphery. I remained immersed in my work, a quiet storm brewing inside me, waiting for the right moment to unleash the tempest. Their lack of awareness became a sweet symphony, a melody of complacency. In their obliviousness, I found a perverse delight, a place cultivating potential just outside their grasp, unfurling like an unseen hand reaching for their unwitting throats. I took a deep breath, feeling the anticipation cloak me like armor. Sleep well with borrowed victories, I thought. Soon, they'd lay upon the bed of their ignorance, slipping into a dream so utterly unprepared for the reality that awaited them. And in that stillness, I smiled, not openly, but within the confines of my mind. where strategy and clarity danced joyously, preparing for the unveiling of a slow, deliberate crescendo. I spent the next few months crafting my revenge with artisan precision, molding it into a weapon far deadlier than any explosive outburst. The tiny office across the street from their empire became my crucible. I outfitted it with just the essentials: a desk, a sleek laptop, and an ever-growing collection of business intelligence. It was in this quiet sanctuary where I would transform my $10,000 investment into the lifeblood of a rival brand, one they would never see coming. Each day, I watched them from my perch as their lives unfolded behind glass. They thrived in the arrogance of their fabricated triumphs, laughing over glasses of expensive whiskey, a mockery of the trust they'd shattered. I observed their fragility, cataloging their missteps with the dutiful precision of a surgeon. Power sits in the quiet corner of the room, saying nothing. Their careless chatter wrapped around me like a thick fog, and I drank in the atmosphere, consuming every morsel of their confidence. I reached out to the discarded talent they had cast aside, those who had been burnt in their ruthless game. I offered compassion where they had found only scorn. "You've been sidelined," I told them softly, "but with me, you can shine." One by one, they stepped into the shadows, drawn by the allure of rebirth. As they joined my growing endeavor, I molded their skills into a carefully crafted toolkit that would become integral to my empire. I didn't see my actions as pity. I viewed them as strategy. Each new team member injected life into my plans. Each wage paid, each shared cup of coffee, slowly building a mosaic of resilience. This wasn't chaos. This was creation. I invested every cent into a vision that would flourish in the space they had unknowingly left open. With every delay, every laugh shared over a strategic meeting, I secured my future, inching closer to the creation of something formidable. I watched them fail to notice the shifting winds, the whisper of change rustling like leaves in late autumn. News of my venture began to seep into the industry, trickling in like rainfall after a drought. They would look up one day, lulled by their arrogance, only to find themselves drowning. "Sleep well with borrowed victories. I'll bill you for interest." They remained blissfully ignorant while I circled them like a hawk, the confidence behind my calm a wave ready to crash down upon their revelry. Deliberately, I planted seeds of confusion and doubt that would soon blossom into escalating anxiety. They believed themselves untouchable, ensconced in their fortress of glass. But they were blind to the predator lurking just beyond their doorframes. Soon, the pieces would come together, and the realization of their precarious position would strike like a sudden storm, harsh and unforgiving. Closure looked like watching them read quarterly reports with shaking hands. This was nothing more than a rehearsal, a quiet symphony building toward a climax that would erupt with chilling clarity. I savored the anticipation, each moment thick with tension. I watched them dance, unaware of the fate unraveling before them. It was only a matter of time. However, patience lay in the stillness I inhabited, in the silence transformed into a crescendo waiting to explode. Their quaint little celebration would end, and I would be there, standing in the shadows, reveling in their descent into chaos. Time stretched, each second a test of endurance. I found solace in the stillness of my office, the echoes of my breathing creating a rhythmic pulse that matched my heartbeat. Outside, they reveled in their chosen ignorance, sipping on false confidence like a cheap wine. They thought they had taken everything from me, but now I was building something far mightier. Then came the email. A single ping jolted me from my contemplative state. A familiar name lit the screen. Claire. Caution raised its head, and I debated the prospect of opening it. Claire had been one of my most trusted allies. Now she was a possible liability. She'd recently returned to the fold, eager to shake off the dust of her past. But the word urgent practically screamed from the screen. I clicked open. The words hit me like a fist to the gut. I saw something last night. They're planning a big move. Fear was a ripple passing through me, the first sign of weakness I had allowed to surface in months. My pulse quickened. Did she know the depth of my endeavor? The walls of my carefully erected fortress suddenly felt less impenetrable. "They're aware you're still nearby," she continued. "I didn't hear specifics, but they're probing around. Keep your head down." I stared at the email as if it were a stranger's confession. The plan wasn't supposed to fracture. I had nurtured patience like a hunter waiting for the right moment to strike. I had studied their moves, but now, with their suspicions piqued, I was forced to adapt. I didn't react. I recalibrated. The quiet tension in the room thickened. Outside, their laughter echoed, filling the air with a confidence that was now framed by internal strife. They thought they were untouchable, and perhaps I was wrong to give them too little credit. It was no longer just about building while they celebrated victory. It was about dismantling their facade without them realizing it. I closed Claire's email and stared into the distance, beyond the glass walls of their fortress. I could feel the momentum shift, a tide that might pull my well-laid plans under. Still, I steeled myself. Every breach came with an opportunity, every crack a weak link to exploit. "Sleep well with borrowed victories. I'll bill you for interest," I whispered to myself, a mantra of resolve. I would observe, I would listen, I would adapt. Shadows crept into my mind, reminding me of the need for stealth. I needed to be further removed, less predictable. The office, though a sanctuary, was feeling like a cage now, my self-imposed exile by choice, not necessity. I pulled out my sleek laptop and began a new strategy document, recalibrating my approach to rumored whispers of their shuffling backroom deals. Anxiety would not take the wheel, precision would. My path was steady. Although a pulse of doubt pressed against my composure, I understood it well. It was not a weakness. It was a sign that I was awake, aware, a hunter seeking prey in the depths of a storm. The tension was heavy, like a blade in need of sharpening. I wouldn't allow my mind to succumb to unpredictability. I would strike when they least expected it, not with reckless fury, but with calculated poise. I wanted to show them my transformation, the range of my control. As I closed the documents, a calm washed over me. Adaptation didn't mean fear, it meant evolution. I would tread deeper into their shadows, twisting my approach to mirror their anticipated movements, always a step ahead of their assumptions. The pieces might have shifted on the board, but the game was far from over. If I were to survive, I had to outsmart them, and I would, with surgical precision. Each correction was a step toward their reckoning. I would remain their unseen shadow, slipping further into the dark. They wouldn't know what hit them. The moment had arrived, cloaked in silence, the kind that muffles the chaotic din of their self-congratulations. Weeks of meticulous preparation condensed into this singular moment, a carefully orchestrated launch that would awaken them from their delusions. The press release was scheduled. My product line was ready for the world. My quiet rebellion, dressed as commerce, polished and sharp. From my vantage in the gray office, a sanctuary I had built from the ashes of their betrayal, I could almost taste their ignorance. Their laughter echoed beyond my thin walls, drowning in the air of overconfidence, while I shaped my resolve in silence. They had celebrated too soon, positioned their victories like trophies on display, unaware of the storm I had nurtured. This was the brilliance of my plan. They would never anticipate the looming shadow. I clicked through the documents one last time, every word weighted like steel. This wasn't a mere business venture. It was their reckoning. The $10,000 I had invested emerged not as a vengeful strike, but as a meticulously forged weapon. Each detail honed to precision. My competitors remained blissfully unaware, circling the drain of their own arrogance while my quiet emergence would drain their ranks and shake their foundations. The press release dropped with the elegance of a swan gliding across a lake, imperceptibly shifting the waters below. Almost immediately, I watched as their clients, the ones who had once nestled comfortably within their grasp, began to migrate toward my creation. They had been seeking change, perhaps even a fresh breeze after the stagnant air of my old empire. I wouldn't have to chase them. I simply had to be present. I had learned the art of invitation while remaining hidden, the allure of a new dawn beckoning them away from the darkness they thought themselves immune to. As I sat quietly, I could almost hear the tension rise on the other side of the street. Meetings would erupt into chaos as they puzzled over their retreating clients. I didn't have to announce my vengeance. It would unfold like a carefully crafted plot twist, a slow unspooling that would leave them grappling with the implications. In that silence, I felt a profound satisfaction wash over me. This was the true essence of revenge. Not the loud clash of swords, but the quiet mastery of a mind sharpened and tempered in the fires of betrayal. The bitterness I had harbored transformed into something greater, the knowledge that vindication doesn't need a stage, it needs time. That soft trickle of uncertainty would soon flood their boardrooms, turn their bravado into panic. Watch as their facade cracked under the weight of reality. Closure looks like watching them read quarterly reports with shaking hands, I mused, allowing the image to linger in my thoughts. I imagined them, gazes darting nervously around the room, bracing for the blow that had already been delivered. The reports would show a sudden dip in their revenues, that unmistakable shift that whispered of impending doom. And I, their erstwhile adversary, stood poised and resolute, the architect of their decline. Each day spent in quiet observation had armed me with weapons they could never see. My strategy had incapacitated them, while they continued their celebratory dances in ignorance. I prepared myself. There was no thrill in what I had accomplished, no sense of malice. There was simply an affirmation of my own mastery, an understanding that revenge is not about the eruption of furious emotions, but about the cold-blooded satisfaction of watching the chess pieces I had placed across the board fall into alignment. Each movement both deliberate and decisive, leading to an inevitable conclusion I had orchestrated. So, I remained still, a phantasm in their rear view, unnoticed and powerful, just waiting for the right moments to rise from the shadows. Sleep well with borrowed victories, I reminded myself, knowing that their worst nightmares were only just beginning to emerge. I was more than a ghost. I was a master of the game, an unseen hand intent on reshaping their reality, one calculated move at a time. Cracks in their walls. They were basking in unearned glory when the first whispers of unrest began to circulate within their fortress. I felt the tremor through the glass, a subtle vibration beneath the laughter and bravado, a warning, sharp and clear. The empire they had built on shaky foundations was about to crumble, and I was the architect behind the impending collapse, the ghost the world hadn't seen coming. It started innocently enough. Former allies began ghosting their calls, conversations that once flowed freely now punctured with silence. I reclined against the hard plastic of my office chair, the weight of anticipation settling into my bones like stones dropped down a well. Each unanswered call was a note in the somber symphony of their demise, and my silent satisfaction could have drowned out their festering anxiety. As days piled up, whispers turned to murmurs and then to concerns. Their facade was cracking, and beneath it, I could see the tendrils of panic creeping into their carefully curated world. The facade of confidence they wore now felt as thin as a paper mask, and I was the hand that threatened to tear it away. In their bubble of complacency, they had neglected the simple principle: every empire is built on a shaky foundation, and storms do eventually come. I watched as their PR team took a hit. Invitation lists grew sparse, the excitement fueling their previous triumphs waning. Even their investors turned cold, drifting towards my rising star like moths to a flame. I didn't have to scream or gloat. I let the weight of my plan do the talking. Each step I took meticulously calculated, the crescendo rising in absolute silence. They were desperate now, scrambling in their polished conference rooms, whispering conspiracy theories about how they had lost their grip on their clients. They'd underestimated me, thought me weak and defeated. But I was the predator, circling closer with each passing moment, their anxiety like perfume in the air, sweet, intoxicating, and utterly delightful. The moment a former partner tentatively reached out to mend fences, I almost laughed. A symphony of crackling ice surrounding me. They knew it was falling apart. What was left was nothing but desperation clad in formal attire. I didn't destroy you. I designed your collapse, I murmured under my breath, relishing the taste of what was to come. I switched back to my laptop, preparing notes for the next steps. Their fortress, once seen as invincible, had inherited cracks too numerous to count. Even now, a single call from one of them could signal an avalanche, a further destabilization I could plunge into head first. In my mind, I painted the scene, shocked expressions as they grappled with the consequences of their neglect. Let them simmer in this uncertainty. A predator doesn't rush. It waits, weaving a web of quiet chaos until the moment is perfect for the strike. I restrained myself from responding too quickly, from showing my hand. Instead, I savored the knowledge that my methodical brushstrokes were slowly dismantling their canvas. Soon enough, they would feel the curtain drop. The applause for their closing act replaced with a deafening silence. And I would be there to witness it all unfold, hidden in plain sight. Their laughter would shatter against the walls I had built around them, the echoes of their past triumphs drowning in the tide of inevitability. In the quiet, tension twisted around me, not as fear but as strength. They thought they could laugh me away. They thought my 8 months of silence indicated defeat. But I was not crying in the dark. I was preparing the ground to open wide beneath them, the cracks in their walls only the precursor to the collapse that would follow. Let them sink deeper into their delusions. I would rise as they fell, the architect who painted their reality with the black strokes of fate. I had spent $10,000 to prove a point, and a point is always made. The exhilaration crackled in my veins as I sat back and watched them drown, completely unaware that their own hubris was the floodwater that would drag them under. The phone vibrated softly on the desk, the screen illuminating a name I hadn't expected to see again. Mark. My heart didn't skip a beat. It remained steady, like my resolve. I watched the name linger and then fade, an opportunity ignored. The fleeting connection flickered out like a dying ember, and the silence returned, heavier now, infused with a palpable tension. They had thought I would fight back through confrontation, through words laced with venom and vengeance, but my triumph lay in this very stillness. The power to choose was my weapon now, an exhilarating taste of control they'd long forfeited. They'd chosen deception. I had chosen patience. And now, the table was inverted. Let them reach out in desperation. Let them seek a truce. The moment was ripe, yet I craved no exchange of pleasantries. It was proof of my transformation, a signal that the balance had shifted. I was no longer the victim trapped beneath their cunning. They were vulnerable, parading their wounded pride as a badge of honor, blissfully unaware of the death knell sounding within their ranks. You knew where to find me before, I thought coldly, the words echoing in the hollow confines of my mind. You chose not to. It was their turn to ponder the implications of their prior choices, the very foundation of their power, now precariously perched upon the brink of collapse. They had drawn lines in the sand, underestimating the merit of my silence. I turned my gaze toward the window and the looming presence of their building, gleaming in the daylight, unaware that it was steadily eroding from within. Colleagues who once sang their praises now played a different tune, one composed by doubt and discord. I could almost hear the whispering notes of worry, an unsettling harmony that punctured their rich, harmonious facade. While they believed they could dismiss my absence, I had embedded myself further into their subconscious. The longer they thought me gone, the more power I held, like a sniper hidden in the shadows, awaiting the perfect moment to pull the trigger. Each uncertainty I stoked was a stitched seed that would later blossom into sharp reality, piercing the very hearts of their ambitions. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment, seeing patterns now clearer than ever. The fear I'd sensed was no longer an echo. It was fully formed, a living entity creeping through the walls of their confidence. It had given life to excuses and made them reach out, to me. Yet their hands could not grasp what was no longer mine to give. Closure had become their privilege to seek, not mine to offer. Time, I reminded myself, had never been an enemy. It was a quiet ally. In the silence of that office, I felt at peace, aware that each second I allowed to slip by was another inch of soil I gained, fertile ground for my vision to take root. I had spent $10,000, not out of vengeance, but from the intimate understanding that retribution doesn't scream. It whispers, strategically positioning itself under their noses until it becomes a force too potent to ignore. They could not hear the symphony I was writing, the symphony of their undoing. As each note played subtly in their oblivious celebration, their audience shrank one by one until the inevitable silence enveloped them. They may have laughed now, but soon I would be there to witness their expressions of despair as the echoes of my success began to reverberate through their hollow corridors. It was all a game of timing, and I had perfected my hold on it. Everything I had built would operate under the radar, just as it had from the start. While they danced in their arrogance, I remained a shadow, a ghost that would soon emerge to claim what was rightfully mine. an architect of chaos cloaked in unfathomable calm. And with that thought, I let the phone slip from my mind, its call unanswered. I would remain, invisible yet undeniably present, the calm before the storm, every breath carefully measured, every facet of my existence a calculated step toward their inescapable fate. The moment had yet to arrive, but its image burned bright in my mind, a prelude to the inevitable, and in that unbroken silence, I found my purpose. The numbers glimmered on the screen like a freshly polished blade, cold and unforgiving. I leaned back in my chair, allowing the weight of that moment to settle upon my shoulders. The balance sheet from my first month's profit, $10,012.88 above what they had taken from me, grinned back like a satisfied guardian of my meticulously plotted revenge. It wasn't just a sum. It was a declaration, a testimony to the quiet power of patience and strategy. In the soft hum of my office, enveloped by the shadows I had chosen, I tasted the bitterness of their ignorance. They had danced atop a crumbling empire, oblivious to the fissures that had deepened beneath their polished shoes. I imagined their faces, the confusion flickering like shadows in their overexposed world, as they cracked open those quarterly reports, eyes narrowing upon the stark evidence of their decline. Closure looks like watching them read quarterly reports with shaking hands. I had only just begun to enjoy that sweet, unyielding satisfaction. With measured movements, I printed the sheet, each page falling gracefully from the output tray, embodying the culmination of my journey from victim to architect. I didn't need to gloat, nor did I crave a performance. The evidence alone spoke volumes. I framed it, not as an act of arrogance, but as a trophy of restraint. It was my silent testament, a quiet story woven from the threads of their betrayal. Each printed sheet, each calculated figure, bore the weight of my restraint. I had chosen not to respond in rage, but to construct, to learn, transforming my pain into precision. Revenge should never look desperate. It should look deliberate. My actions had not been fueled by the frantic impulses of suffering. They had been executed under the cool gaze of a determined mind, devoid of spite yet swollen with fulfillment. In that muted sanctuary, the air grew thick with an electric pulse of ambition. I envisioned my rivals huddled in their meeting rooms, minds racing as they dissected the unraveling of their facade, the momentum swinging like a pendulum toward chaos. I had let them underestimate me, lulled in by the deceptive calm of my absence. They believed they had cut away my influence, but all they had truly done was gift me the precious time to build anew, unnoticed and unchecked. The thought of their confusion was intoxicating, like a fine whiskey settling on my tongue, warm yet sharp. I reveled in that stillness, the quiet before the storm I had carefully orchestrated, a tempest brewed from the ingredients of hubris and neglect. They thought their triumph was stitched into the fabric of the industry, but I had woven their downfall into the very patterns of their mistakes. As they clawed at their unraveling fortunes, caught in a net woven from their overconfidence, I remained their ghost, a shadow drifting through the periphery of their reality. They wouldn't recognize the menace lurking just beyond their glass walls, nor would they understand the profound impact of their short-sightedness until it was far too late. I had intentionally constructed this silence, not as a cage for my shame, but as a sanctuary for their impending dread. My eyes fell to the framed printout before me, the figures chillingly vivid against the white canvas, a stark reminder of how weighty a lesson bears when it is born from the depths of betrayal. I could almost hear their voices ringing hollow, laughter wafting through the air, naive, self-congratulatory echoes that would soon crack under pressure. I stood, the shift of my weight a silent affirmation that the moment of reckoning had arrived. As my fingers brushed against the edge of the printed balance sheet, I felt the cool paper pulse with the electric energy of potential, a final salutation to the quiet war I had waged. Just as the flames of their arrogance flickered, the ember of my success burned brighter. I took a moment to breathe, to let the cerulean silence wrap around me. The certainty of my position rolled through me like thunderclouds, dark and looming, the calm before an inevitable storm. They thought they had vanquished me. But what they had overlooked was the foundation of my resurgence. They could not extinguish a flame that burned in silence. I stepped back, allowing the enormity of the moment to wash over me. Satisfied, but not ecstatic, I understood that this was not a victory to be celebrated. It was a statement of self-evidence. I had spent $10,000, not just to reclaim what was stolen from me, but to evolve beyond their misconceptions of failure. As I left the office, the balance sheet clutched firmly in my grasp. I prepared to walk past their now familiar facade, its shining exterior foreshadowing the chaos within. I could almost hear the ghostly echoes of their past laughter chasing after me, but I wouldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. I had nothing left to prove. Not to them and certainly not to myself. Their empire was crumbling and I, the architect of their undoing, would fade back into the shadows, my purpose served and my revenge perfectly delivered. I moved forward, embracing freedom from the shackles they had unknowingly forged, kneading their hubris into a quiet tapestry of my own making, each thread woven deliberately into the fabric of silenced success. The office stood vacant, dark windows reflecting the sun's fading light like the hollow remnants of their once bustling empire. I walked past the entrance, my footsteps echoing in the silence, each sound a reminder of the chaos I had meticulously orchestrated from the shadows. No signs of life, no remnants of the arrogance that had once filled those halls. The absence of their celebrations was louder than the echo of their laughter had ever been. In that moment, I felt a sense of finality wash over me, both liberating and heavy. I had executed my plan with a precision that rivaled a surgeon's scalpel. I had not needed to destroy them, no explosive outbursts or public confrontations. Instead, I had dismantled their fortress, piece by piece, without them ever knowing it was happening. They had underestimated me entirely, believing my silence to be resignation instead of the fierce intention it truly was. The investment of $10,000 had become my testament, not merely a sum lost, but the foundation upon which I built my own success. A rival brand, a team replete with the talent they had discarded, and a market strategically seized. I hadn't allowed fury to decide my course. I had let clarity guide my hand. I had fought back in a way they would never anticipate, by rising from the ashes they thought they had scattered. Now, as I stood before that stark building, once the epicenter of my torment, I pondered what it had all cost. I had learned that closure was not rooted in forgiveness or revenge, but in evolution. I had emerged not as a bitter shell of my former self, but as a man of quiet power. A wraith slipping into the folds of industry, leaving behind the ghosts of confidence they had clung to with palpable greed. I realized I had nothing left to prove, not to them and not to myself. Those darkened windows were a final reminder. They had sought to confine me, to define my worth through betrayal, and now their triumph lay in ruins. I kept walking, feeling a weight lift. Not from vindication, but from the simple understanding that this chapter of my life had reached its conclusion. I wasn't just leaving behind a space they could no longer occupy. I was stepping away from the emotional shackles they had forged. Life stretched ahead of me, unburdened by the weight of their machinations. I had embarked on a path of resilience, and with each step, I left behind the echoes of their downfall. The cold air brushed past me, and I embraced it, feeling invigorated by the freedom it heralded. I no longer needed validation or revenge. The point had been made. In the quiet of my heart, I understood that silence carries more power than vengeance ever could. The closing door behind me marked not just the end of their narrative, but the beginning of mine, a journey forged in shadow, illuminated by the fire of clarity. My footsteps faded into the distance, leaving behind locked doors and the finality of an empire brought low. I had spent $10,000 just to prove a point, not to destroy, but to evolve into a version of myself that could transcend the ashes of betrayal. The road before me was empty, full of potential, and as I walked away, I felt the intoxicating weight of my freedom.